The what-if spiral. It often begins so quietly that you don't even notice it at first. A flicker of doubt, a random thought, a small, harmless question in your mind. What if this goes wrong? It feels responsible, even smart, to think ahead. You tell yourself you're preparing, that you're simply being careful. After all, planning never hurt anyone, right? But this isn't real planning. This is imagining storms before they form, rehearsing tragedies before they exist. And before you know it, the single thought has grown roots, spread branches, and now you're tangled in an entire forest of what-ifs. You don't just consider one possibility, you create hundreds. What if I fail leads to, what if they reject me? Which turns into, what if this ruins everything? And then spirals into, what if I regret this forever? Your mind builds scenarios so vivid that your body reacts as if they're happening right now. Your chest tightens, your pulse quickens, your muscles tense. You're living inside situations that aren't even real, paying the emotional cost for events that haven't happened and may never happen at all. This is the cruel trick of the what-if spiral. It convinces you you're taking control, when in reality, you're losing it. You think running through every possibility will prepare you, but the opposite happens. The more you focus on controlling the future, the more you lose your ability to act in the present. Every choice becomes heavier. Every step feels dangerous. You tell yourself you're buying time, but you're really spending time, trading away hours, days, even years to fear that only exists in your imagination. And here's the harsh truth. Most of the disasters you predict will never come true. They remain fiction. They never make it off the page of your mind. But the anxiety you feel about them is painfully real. It drains your energy. It steals your focus. It turns simple moments into mental battlefields. You miss opportunities, not because you couldn't take them, but because you froze, waiting for absolute certainty that will never arrive. The spiral grows stronger the more you feed it. You start to believe your fear is a kind of shield, that by anticipating every bad outcome, you're protecting yourself. But fear is greedy. It always asks for more. One what-if becomes 5, 5 becomes 50, and soon you're rehearsing entire lifetimes of failure before you've even taken the first step. You begin to confuse thinking with doing. You begin to call hesitation preparation. You begin to feel safe in your own inaction, even though that safety is a lie. And here's the worst paradox. While you're busy trying to prepare for every possibility, life is already moving on without you. Opportunities pass, people move forward, the world keeps turning, and you're still standing in the same spot, lost in your head, playing mental chess against opponents that don't even exist. You're waiting for the perfect plan, but perfection isn't coming. All you're really doing is practicing the feeling of fear over and over until it becomes your default state. The what-if spiral is dangerous because it feels rational. It feels like you're being careful, thoughtful, responsible. But what it's really doing is robbing you of the only moment that matters, right now. And the way out isn't found in more thinking, it's found in action. Not reckless action, but any step forward, no matter how small, because clarity doesn't come from imagining every outcome. It comes from facing one real outcome and handling it as it happens. Life will always have what-ifs. You can't think your way into safety. You can't predict your way into certainty. At some point, you have to let go of the endless questions and start living the answers. You have to accept that not knowing is part of the journey, and that your courage is built in the moments when you act despite the fear. The spiral will try to keep you in its loop, whispering, "Just think it through one more time." But you don't owe it another thought. The only question you need to answer is not what if, but what now, and then you take the step your future self will thank you for. The "I'll be happy when" illusion. It's a lie that sounds like the truth, a thought so convincing that it slips into your mind without resistance. I'll be happy when... You fill in the blank with whatever your heart craves. The job, the house, the relationship, the body, the success. You tell yourself you're not asking for too much. You just need that one thing, and then you'll finally breathe. Then you'll finally feel at peace. At first it feels harmless. It feels like ambition, like a goal to work toward. You think you're just postponing happiness for a good reason, so that when it finally arrives, it will feel even better. But here's the hidden trap. The moment you get close to that goal, it moves. The job promotion turns into needing a bigger title. The nice apartment becomes a bigger house. The relationship becomes marriage, then children, then something else. The finish line never stays still. You're chasing it like a horizon, and no matter how far you walk, it never gets closer. The "I'll be happy when" illusion convinces you that joy is always somewhere ahead of you, never here. You tell yourself this delay is discipline, but what you're really doing is postponing your life. You're trading the present for a future that never actually arrives. And even when you do hit a milestone, the feeling isn't what you imagined. Maybe you get a rush, a brief thrill, a shallow exhale, but it fades almost instantly, and then you need the next thing and the next and the next. This isn't happiness, this is escape. You're not chasing joy, you're running from the discomfort of now. You've trained your brain to believe that contentment must be earned, that you have to prove yourself worthy of peace. But peace doesn't live at the end of achievement. Peace is something you choose, or you never find it at all. Because if joy is always in the after, then it will never be in the now. And here's the most painful twist. The more you chase happiness in the future, the more anxious and empty you feel in the present. You've built a rule in your mind. I can't feel good until I achieve this. That rule becomes a prison. Life doesn't always cooperate with your plans. Some dreams take longer. Some never happen. If your happiness is chained to an outcome, then your joy is always at risk, one setback away from disappearing. You stop noticing the small good things that are already here, the warm coffee in your hands, the sound of laughter, the light through the window. You treat them like background noise because you're too focused on measuring your progress. You're waiting for the real thing, not realizing that this is the real thing. This is your life, right now. You've been taught to delay feelings for results, to say things like, I can relax once this is over. But once it's over, something else takes its place. The list never ends, the chase never stops, and the more you chase, the less you live. Here's the paradox. When you stop needing happiness to come from achievement, you actually become more productive. You work better when you're not desperate for a result. You think clearer when you're not clinging to the future with white-knuckled fists. You become creative again, curious again, alive again, because now you're doing the work because you love the work, not because you're starving for the reward. You might fear that if you allow yourself to be content now, you'll lose your drive. But contentment isn't the opposite of ambition. It's the fuel for it. When you're no longer trying to prove your worth, you start chasing things for the right reasons. And the things you create from a place of fullness instead of emptiness are the ones that matter most. The final truth is this: happiness isn't something you earn. It's not a medal at the top of the mountain. It's in how you climb. It's in how you breathe while you climb. It's in the moments you notice without rushing past them. If you can't find joy in the small things now, you won't find it in the big things later. Because the mind that always says not yet will never say enough. You don't need to wait for the next thing. You don't need to lock joy away like it's a prize you haven't earned. You are already here. You are already enough. The real question isn't, when will I be happy? The real question is, why not now? Overthinking every interaction. It's a habit that hides itself as care. You tell yourself you're just being thoughtful, just making sure you said the right thing, just making sure you were understood. But hours later, you're still replaying the conversation in your head, every word, every pause, every laugh, every glance. It's like the interaction never ended for you, even though the other person has long moved on. You start dissecting it piece by piece. You ask yourself, was my tone wrong? Did I say too much, not enough? Did they misunderstand me? Did I make it awkward? You examine a laugh and wonder if it was genuine. You think about a pause and wonder if it was uncomfortable. You replay their reactions, trying to decode the meaning behind every tiny shift in expression. And the more you think about it, the less sure you become. That's the paradox. The more you try to gain clarity, the more confusion you create. You thought reviewing the moment would bring you peace, but instead, it turns into a loop that gets tighter each time you run through it. And because you're reviewing it through the lens of insecurity, you don't remember the conversation as it happened. You remember it as you fear it happened. You add shadows that weren't there. You rewrite details to fit your worries. Overthinking feels like a form of control, but it's really the opposite. You can't change what's already been said. You can't go back and edit the moment. But your mind keeps trying, as if the 100th replay will somehow change the outcome. You keep hoping that if you go over it enough times, you'll hear something different, something that makes you feel better. But instead, the more you listen, the worse it sounds. And here's the strange twist. The deeper you go into overthinking, the less accurate your memory becomes. You're not remembering facts, you're remembering your fears. You start believing the story your anxiety tells you, even when there's no proof. Even when, in reality, the other person probably hasn't thought twice about the conversation. Overthinking also has another hidden cost. It changes how you show up in the future. You walk into the next interaction already guarded, already nervous, already bracing for another loop of self-analysis later. You speak less freely. You hesitate more. You filter every sentence before it leaves your mouth. You're not connecting anymore. You're performing. And that performance makes it harder for people to see the real you. You might believe this habit makes you more careful, more likable, more emotionally intelligent. But there's a fine line between self-awareness and self-sabotage, and overthinking crosses it every time. It doesn't make you better with people. It pulls you away from them. It makes you focus so much on how you're being perceived that you forget to actually be present. The truth is, most people aren't analyzing you the way you analyze yourself. That awkward pause you're obsessing over, they didn't even notice. That sentence you regret, they've already forgotten it. Most people are too busy in their own heads, wondering how they came across. You think you're under a spotlight, but often there's no spotlight at all. And here's the paradox. The more you care about being understood, the less you allow yourself to speak naturally. The less you speak naturally, the harder it is for people to truly understand you. Overthinking builds a wall between you and connection, a wall made of doubt, hesitation, and imagined mistakes. The way forward isn't to force yourself to stop thinking entirely. It's to change the focus of your thoughts. Reflection is healthy when it asks, what can I learn for next time? But overthinking always asks, what did I do wrong? Reflection frees you. Overthinking traps you. The truth is, connection isn't built on perfect words. It's built on presence, on warmth, on being willing to be imperfect in front of someone and letting them see that imperfection without apology. People don't connect to a flawless script. They connect to the moments when you're simply real. So when your mind starts pulling you into the replay, remember this. You don't need to solve a conversation that's already over. You don't need to edit the past to feel safe in the present. Let the words you've spoken stay spoken. Let the moment belong to the moment. And instead of asking yourself, what if I said the wrong thing, try asking, what if I've already said enough? The endless comparison loop. It begins with something small, a glance at someone's life, their work, their success. Maybe it's a post on social media, a story you hear from a friend, or something you notice in passing. You tell yourself you're just curious, just looking for a little perspective. You want to see where you stand, you want to feel inspired. But instead of feeling motivated, you feel smaller. Suddenly what you were proud of yesterday doesn't seem like much today. That's the dangerous part. Comparison shifts the ground beneath your feet without you even noticing. You were fine until you looked sideways. You thought your progress was enough until you saw someone moving faster. You felt confident until you saw someone who looked more polished, more accomplished, more ahead. And here's the paradox. You start comparing to feel more certain, but every comparison makes you less certain. It strips away the pride you had in your own progress and replaces it with doubt. Now, no matter how much you achieve, someone else will always have more, and you'll always feel behind. You're not asking, am I becoming who I want to be anymore? You're asking, am I catching up to them? And that question has no finish line. The more you compare, the more your goals stop being yours. They become borrowed. You adjust your path to match theirs, even if it doesn't fit you. You start chasing achievements you didn't even want in the first place, not because they bring meaning, but because they'll make you look like you're winning. And in that race, your own joy becomes secondary. The cruel twist? The people you compare yourself to are often comparing themselves to someone else. You're measuring your worth against someone who feels just as unsure as you do. Everyone's looking sideways, and no one feels grounded. Everyone is chasing, and no one feels like they've arrived. Comparison also hides the truth. You only see the highlight reel, the curated moments, the best angles, the filtered snapshots. You don't see the struggle, the doubt, the failures they keep private. You compare your full unedited life to their most flattering frame, and when your messy reality doesn't match their polished surface, you decide you're losing. But here's another paradox. The more you compare, the less connected you feel. You stop seeing people as humans and start seeing them as benchmarks. You turn potential friends into silent competitors. You measure rather than relate. Even victories start to lose their meaning. Because the moment you achieve something, you look for who did it better or faster. And it's never enough. Even if you became the best, you'd be afraid of losing the top spot. Your worth would still be tied to staying ahead. That's why success reached through comparison feels hollow. It's fragile. It depends on things you can't control, other people's speed, their wins, their choices. And because of that, you live in constant pressure, scanning for threats to your place in the race. The only way to break the loop is to stop looking sideways and start looking inward. To shift the question from, "Am I better than them?" to, "Am I better than I was yesterday?" Because when your measurement is personal growth, you win every time you take a step forward, no matter how small, no matter who's watching. The truth is, worth is not earned through comparison. It's found in alignment, in living your life, in a way that feels true to you, not in a way that looks impressive to someone else. Your path is unique, and it can't be measured on someone else's scale. When you return to your own lane, you not only move forward faster, you also begin to enjoy the view again. The endless comparison loop will always be there, ready to pull you back in. But you don't have to keep running it. You can step off the track, breathe, and remind yourself, you're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be for the story you're living. And the moment you stop measuring your life against someone else's, you start experiencing the kind of peace they might be wishing they had too. Assuming everyone thinks like you. It's one of the most subtle traps we fall into, and most of the time we don't even realize we're doing it. We walk through the world believing, on some level, that other people see life the way we do, that they value what we value, that they notice what we notice, that they would make the same choices we'd make if they were in our shoes. It's an invisible assumption, one that feels harmless, but has the power to create deep misunderstandings, silent resentments, and broken expectations. When you assume someone thinks like you naturally expect them to act in ways that make sense to you. If you value honesty, you expect them to always tell the truth. If you value loyalty, you expect them to stick around no matter how hard things get. If you care about the little details, you expect them to notice them too. But the moment they act in a way that goes against your internal logic, it feels personal. It feels like betrayal. It feels wrong. That's because your mind has been playing by rules you never actually explained to them. You think those rules are universal, but they're not. They're yours, shaped by your upbringing, your culture, your personality, your experiences. What's obvious to you might be invisible to them. What feels important to you might feel irrelevant to them. This assumption causes problems in every type of relationship: romantic, professional, family, friendships. You give someone space when they're upset, because that's what you would want, but they take it as you pulling away. You speak directly about a problem because that's what I would appreciate, but they see it as confrontation. You try to show care in the way you like to receive it, and when they don't respond the way you hoped, you feel unappreciated. And here's the irony. They're doing the same thing to you. They're assuming you think like them. They're making choices based on what would make sense in their world, expecting you to respond the way they would. And when you don't, they're just as confused and disappointed as you are. This cycle leads to frustration on both sides, because neither person is truly seeing the other. You're both looking through your own filters, interpreting each other's actions through your own perspective, and missing the reality of who the other person actually is. Breaking this habit requires humility. It means stepping back and admitting that your way of seeing the world isn't the only way, and it's not automatically the right way. It means being willing to ask, how do you see this? What does this mean to you? What would you do in my position? It means replacing assumption with curiosity. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone or abandon your own values. It means understanding that shared values aren't a given, they're discovered. They're built through conversations, through paying attention, through the willingness to learn how someone else's mind works without trying to mold it into yours. When you drop the assumption that everyone thinks like you start noticing the world in a new way. You realize that people aren't being difficult just to hurt you. They're operating from a different internal map. Sometimes those maps can align beautifully, but other times they require translation. This is where empathy comes alive. True empathy isn't just feeling what you would feel in someone's shoes, it's imagining what they would feel in their shoes. It's stepping outside of yourself long enough to see that different doesn't always mean wrong. The danger of assuming everyone thinks like you is that it turns you into both judge and victim without realizing it. You judge others for breaking rules they never knew existed. You feel wronged when they don't act according to a standard they never agreed to. And you end up carrying resentments toward people who may have never intended to harm you at all. The moment you stop assuming, relationships start to change. Misunderstandings shrink, communication improves. And you start to see people as they are, not as you imagine them to be. That shift can save friendships, deepen partnerships, and soften conflicts before they grow into something unfixable. In the end, this truth is simple but powerful. No one thinks exactly like you. And that's not a flaw in the system, it's the beauty of it. The goal isn't to make everyone share your mind, but to learn how different minds can still connect, understand, and grow together. The productivity guilt trap. It starts with a feeling, a subtle, almost invisible pressure sitting on your shoulders the moment you're not actively doing something. You might be resting, scrolling on your phone, sipping coffee, staring out the window. And then it hits you, that voice, that gnawing sense that you should be working, that you're wasting time, that you're falling behind. This isn't just ambition. It's not simply wanting to get ahead. This is something heavier, this is guilt. The kind that creeps in every time you slow down, as if taking a breath is an act of failure. You've internalized the belief that your worth is tied to how much you produce, and if you're not producing, you're not enough. You tell yourself you'll rest when the work is done, but the work is never done. There's always more to do. Another task, another email, another project. And because your mind is always scanning for the next thing, you never actually arrive at a place where you feel allowed to rest. You've set the finish line so far ahead that you'll never cross it. And here's the cruel twist. Even when you're doing nothing, you're not actually resting. You're mentally punishing yourself the whole time. You're thinking about all the things you should be doing, all the ways you're falling short, all the people who are out there getting ahead while you're sitting here doing nothing. Your body might be still, but your mind is in a full sprint. This guilt doesn't just ruin your downtime, it ruins your productivity too. You're so afraid of not doing enough that you fill your days with constant activity. But constant activity isn't the same as meaningful progress. You start doing tasks just to feel busy. You clean your desk instead of tackling the hard project. You answer every email instantly, even if it can wait. You become addicted to the illusion of productivity, mistaking motion for momentum. And because you've tied your identity to output, you can't stand the thought of being unproductive. If you have a slow day, you feel like you've failed as a person. If you take a break, you tell yourself you're lazy. You start seeing rest as an obstacle to success instead of a requirement for it. The truth is, this mindset doesn't make you more effective. It burns you out. Without real rest, your creativity fades. Your decision-making suffers. Your motivation wears down. You might be working more hours, but you're producing less of what actually matters. And deep down, you know it. That's why the guilt keeps coming back, because no matter how much you do, it never feels like enough. This is the trap. The more you achieve, the higher you raise the bar. You think hitting the next milestone will finally let you relax, but when you get there, your mind just moves the goalpost. Now, you have to do more. Do it faster. Do it better. The moment you stop, you feel like you're slipping, like you're losing your edge. And the worst part, you start applying this standard to others without realizing it. You judge people who rest too much. You think they're wasting their time. You secretly resent their ability to unplug because you can't imagine doing the same without guilt eating you alive. Breaking out of the productivity guilt trap requires rewiring how you define value. You have to separate your worth from your output. You have to remind yourself, daily, that rest isn't a reward you earn, it's fuel you need. You can't expect your mind to work at its best when you never let it recover. The truth is, the people who achieve the most over the long term are not the ones who grind without pause. They're the ones who know when to stop, who understand that a well-rested mind works faster, creates better, and solves problems more effectively than one running on fumes. They see rest not as a weakness but as part of the strategy. If you can't rest without feeling guilty, then you're not in control of your time. Your guilt is, and that means no matter how much you accomplish, you'll never feel free. Freedom doesn't come from checking everything off your list. It comes from knowing that you're allowed to exist without constantly proving your worth. So next time that guilt creeps in, remember this. You are not a machine. You are not built to run endlessly without pause. Your value is not measured in how many tasks you complete before sunset. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do for your life, your work, and your future is to step away, breathe, and let yourself be. No justification needed. The "I always fail" narrative. It's one of the most dangerous lies you can tell yourself because it doesn't just shape how you see the past. It controls how you live in the present and what you allow yourself to believe about the future. The "I always fail" narrative doesn't start as a belief. It starts as a memory, one or two moments where things didn't go your way, a test you didn't pass, a job you didn't get, a relationship that didn't work out. At first, they're just isolated events. They sting, but they're just part of life. Then something shifts. You start connecting the dots in the worst possible way. You don't see them as separate moments anymore. You see them as proof. Proof that you're not capable. Proof that no matter how hard you try, you'll mess it up. And once you start telling yourself that story, your brain starts collecting more evidence. You remember every failure in detail, but you blur out every success. You cling to the losses like they define you, and you dismiss the wins like they don't count. Before long, it becomes a loop. You go into new situations already convinced you'll fail, and because of that, you don't give your full effort. You hold back, hesitate, sabotage yourself without realizing it. And when the result isn't what you hoped for, you say, "See, I was right. I always fail." That's the cruel part. The narrative sustains itself. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The "I always fail" mindset also changes how you interpret the world. You stop seeing challenges as opportunities to grow. You see them as traps, as chances to confirm your worst fears about yourself. You avoid risks not because you don't want the reward, but because you can't handle the idea of one more piece of proof that you're not enough. And so you shrink your life. You say no to things you secretly want, not because you can't do them, but because you've already decided the ending before the story begins. Here's the twist. Failure itself isn't what damages you. Everyone fails. Everyone falls short sometimes. What damages you is attaching identity to it. The moment you go from "I failed" to "I am a failure," you stop treating mistakes as moments and start treating them as destiny. You forget that failure is supposed to be a teacher, not a prison guard. And yet it's easy to stay here. There's a strange comfort in expecting the worst. If you believe you'll always fail, you never have to risk the pain of disappointment, because you've already decided to be disappointed from the start. It feels safer to keep your dreams small, your steps cautious, your efforts minimal. That way, when it doesn't work out, you can shrug and say, "I knew this would happen." But here's the brutal truth. That safety is costing you your life. You're not protecting yourself from pain, and you're guaranteeing it. Because the pain of not trying, the pain of living smaller than you could, the pain of watching years pass without seeing what you're really capable of, that's the kind of pain that doesn't fade. That's the kind that turns into regret. The way out starts with catching the story in real time, noticing when you hear yourself say, "I always fail," and then asking, "Always? Is that actually true?" Chances are it's not. Chances are there are moments you've succeeded, moments you've grown, moments you've handled things better than you thought you could. But you've trained yourself to ignore them. It's time to start noticing them again. Rewriting this narrative isn't about pretending you've never failed. It's about seeing the full picture, About realizing that failure is just data, feedback, a step in the process, not a final label stamped on your identity. It's about understanding that success isn't built by avoiding failure, but by using it, by letting it sharpen you instead of shrink you. The people who go the farthest aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who don't let failure decide who they are. They feel the sting, learn the lesson, and keep moving. And every time they do, they chip away at the old story and replace it with a new one. I keep trying, I keep showing up, and that's why I win. If you've been living under the weight of the "I always fail" belief, you need to understand this. You're not cursed, you're not broken, you're not defined by your worst days. You've simply been repeating a story that was never the full truth, and the moment you stop telling it, you give yourself the chance to write something different. Because failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. And the sooner you see that, the sooner you realize you were never failing as much as you thought. You were just still in the middle of your story. The sunk cost fallacy. It's one of the most deceptive traps the mind can fall into. The belief that because you've already given so much, you have to keep giving, even when it's no longer worth it. We tell ourselves it's loyalty. We tell ourselves it's commitment. We tell ourselves we're not quitters. But beneath all that reasoning, there's a fear. The fear of admitting that all the time, money, energy, or love we've poured into something might never give us the return we hoped for. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't just live in finances or business. It shows up in careers, in relationships, in projects, in dreams we've outgrown but can't seem to let go of. You stay in the job that's killing your spirit because you've already invested 10 years into it. You hold on to a relationship that's draining you because you've already built a history together. You keep pushing a failing idea because you've already put in too much work to walk away now. And that's the trap. You focus so much on what you've already given that you stop asking the most important question. Is it still worth giving more? You let the past dictate your future, as if the cost you've already paid can somehow justify paying even more. But the truth is, the time, money, or energy you've already spent is gone. It's a debt that will never be repaid. The only thing you control now is what you'll give next, and whether you'll give it to something that's actually worth it. This fallacy feeds on pride. We don't want to feel like we've wasted our efforts. We don't want to look like we made a bad choice. We'd rather double down on the wrong decision than face the discomfort of saying, "I was wrong, this isn't working." We convince ourselves that holding on is strength, but sometimes it's just fear, wearing the mask of persistence. It also feeds on hope. You keep thinking, just a little more, and it'll turn around. You tell yourself you've come too far to stop now. You picture the moment when all your sacrifice finally pays off, and that vision keeps you from noticing that the cost is growing heavier while the reward grows smaller. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't just steal your resources, it steals your future. Every hour you give to the wrong thing is an hour you can't give to the right one. Every drop of energy you pour into what's draining you is energy you can't pour into what could actually grow. And the longer you stay, the harder it feels to leave, because now you've invested even more. The trap tightens with every step. And here's the paradox. Walking away sooner almost always feels harder in the moment, but it saves you far more pain in the long run. Cutting your losses feels like defeat, but in reality, it's reclaiming your freedom. It's not about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let a bad decision keep deciding for you. Think about the relationships where love turned into obligation. Think about the projects where passion turned into resentment. Think about the goals that once inspired you, but now feel like a burden. In each of those, the sunk cost fallacy whispers, "Don't give up now. You've already given too much." But what it doesn't tell you is that staying might be the very thing keeping you from the life you actually want. The real strength is not in holding on at all costs. It's in having the courage to stop when something no longer serves you. It's in admitting that your time, energy, and attention are too valuable to keep feeding something that's already over. When you finally let go, you don't lose the lessons you gained. You don't erase the good moments. You don't undo the growth you went through while you were there. You simply choose to stop paying for a future that doesn't exist. And in that moment, you free yourself to invest in something that's alive, something that can actually return your effort with growth, joy, and purpose. The sunk cost fallacy thrives on the idea that quitting equals failure. But sometimes quitting is the most intelligent thing you can do. Sometimes it's the only way to protect your energy, your future, and your peace. The past is already spent. The question isn't, have I given too much to walk away? It's, am I willing to give even more to something that's already proven it won't give back? Because the truth is, you don't get your time back. You don't get your energy back. But you do get to decide where the next part of your life goes. And that choice is worth more than any sunk cost you've left behind. Seeking closure from people who can't give it closure. It sounds like the final chapter, the last page, the moment when you finally put the book down and walk away without looking back. We chase it because we believe it will give us peace. We imagine that if we could just get the right explanation, the right apology, the right acknowledgement, then the knots in our chest would loosen and we could move on. But here's the trap. Some people can't give you closure. Not because they won't, but because they're simply not capable of giving you what you're asking for. You might be seeking honesty from someone who can't even be honest with themselves. You might be asking for understanding from someone who never truly saw you. You might be waiting for empathy from someone who has never learned how to give it. And yet you wait. You send one more text. You replay the last conversation in your head. You imagine scenarios where they finally get it, and everything clicks into place. You tell yourself you just need one more talk, one more meeting, one more chance to be heard. But the truth is, the longer you wait for them to give you peace, the more power you hand them over your healing. Seeking closure from the wrong source is like trying to draw water from an empty well. It doesn't matter how deep you reach. Nothing's coming up. And every time you try, you're reminded of what isn't there. Instead of finding resolution, you find the same disappointment, over and over again. This kind of closure seeking often comes from a need for validation. You want them to admit they hurt you, to confirm that your pain is real, to take responsibility so you can stop carrying it alone. But here's the harsh truth. Some people will never validate your pain, not because it isn't real, but because doing so would require them to face their own guilt. And for them, denial is easier than accountability. It's also about control. When something ends abruptly, or in a way that feels unfair, we feel powerless. We want closure because it feels like a way to regain control over the story. We think if we can understand why it happened, we can file it away neatly in our minds and move forward without the mess. But life doesn't always give us neat endings. Sometimes it leaves the door hanging open, and you have to walk away without ever hearing it close behind you. The danger of waiting for closure from others is that it keeps you emotionally tied to them. You can't fully move forward because part of you is still standing in the past, waiting for their words to set you free. It's like keeping your suitcase packed at the door, hoping someone will come and hand you the ticket to leave, when in reality the only ticket that exists is the one you give yourself. The truth is, closure isn't something you're given. It's something you create. It's the decision to stop needing answers from people who have already shown you who they are. It's accepting that you might never understand their choices, but you can understand your own worth enough to walk away anyway. Creating your own closure means rewriting the story without their input. It means deciding that the ending isn't about what they did to you. It's about what you did for yourself afterward. It's about turning the page, even if it feels like the last sentence is missing, because your life is not meant to pause until someone else gives you permission to continue. And yes, that's hard. It's hard to stop expecting the apology that will never come. It's hard to let go of the fantasy where they finally understand. It's hard to accept that some people can live with what they've done, even if you can't. But the alternative is harder, staying stuck in a loop that keeps you tied to a person who has already moved on, or worse, never cared to begin with. The freedom you're looking for won't come from their words. It will come from your choice to stop waiting for them to speak. It will come from deciding that your healing matters more than their acknowledgement. It will come from realizing that the real closure isn't them saying, "I'm sorry." It's you saying, "I'm done." Closure is not an external gift. It's an internal shift. And once you give it to yourself, you stop needing anything from the person who couldn't give it to you in the first place. Romanticizing the past. It begins with a memory, soft around the edges, warm in color, just clear enough to make you ache for it. You're not thinking about the details you didn't like, the moments that frustrated you, the nights you lay awake wondering if you were in the right place. No, those parts have faded. What's left are the pieces you've polished over time, the highlights you've replayed so often they've become more beautiful than they ever were in reality. This is the danger of romanticizing the past. It's not that the good moments didn't happen. It's that we edit out the parts that would keep us from wanting to go back. We take a chapter of our life and turn it into a highlight reel, forgetting that there were reasons we moved forward in the first place. When you romanticize the past, you start comparing your present to a version of the past that never truly existed. Your memory becomes a painting, not a photograph, and you've painted over the cracks. You remember the relationship as perfect because you've forgotten the loneliness you felt inside it. You remember the job as fulfilling because you've forgotten the exhaustion it demanded from you. You remember a period of your life as simpler because you've erased the anxiety that lived in it every day. And here's the trap. The more you idealize the past, the less you invest in the present. You tell yourself life was better back then, so you stop noticing the beauty in what's right here. You measure your current happiness against an exaggerated memory and wonder why it doesn't measure up. You forget that back then had its own struggles, its own heartbreaks, its own uncertainty. You just don't feel them anymore because time has softened the edges. We romanticize the past for many reasons. Sometimes it's nostalgia, that bittersweet longing for moments we know we can't relive. Sometimes it's regret, the feeling that we made a wrong turn somewhere and could have had a better life if we'd chosen differently. And sometimes it's simply avoidance, focusing on an idealized past so we don't have to face a present we find disappointing. But here's the thing. The past can be comforting, but it can also be dangerous when it becomes your standard for happiness. You can't move forward while constantly looking over your shoulder. You can't build a better life if you're convinced the best one is already behind you. And there's a deeper truth. The version of the past you miss doesn't really exist anymore. Even if you could go back, it wouldn't be the same. You've changed, the people have changed, the world around you has changed. What you're longing for isn't an exact time and place. It's the feeling you had during it. And that feeling can be created again, but only if you're willing to create it in the present. Romanticizing the past can also make you blind to the lessons it was trying to teach you. When you filter out the pain, you forget why you left, why you grew, why you made the choices you did. You risk walking in circles, chasing an old version of happiness and ending up right back in situations you once worked so hard to escape. The past is meant to be learned from, not lived in. You can treasure the memories without turning them into a prison. You can appreciate what was good without pretending it was perfect. And you can let yourself feel the sadness of time passing without letting it stop you from building something worth remembering in the future. The truth is, the only time that exists is now. The past can't touch you. It can only call to you. And if you answer too often, you risk missing the life that's unfolding in front of you. One day today will be the good old days you wish you could go back to. The difference is, you have the chance to live it now, instead of only remembering it later. So keep the good memories. Honor them. Let them inspire you. But don't let them convince you that your best days are over. The past may be a beautiful place to visit, but it's not where you're meant to stay. Approval addiction. It starts quietly, often in childhood, when you first realize that being accepted, praised, or liked feels good, and being rejected, criticized, or ignored feels unbearable. Over time, that awareness turns into a pattern. You start scanning for cues, reading faces, and shaping yourself to fit the expectations of the people around you. You learn what to say to make them smile. You learn what not to say to avoid their disapproval. At first, it doesn't seem like a problem. After all, wanting to be liked is human. Approval feels like connection, like belonging. But slowly, something changes. The more you rely on external approval to feel worthy, the more you hand over control of your happiness to other people. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will make them happy with me?" This is how approval addiction takes hold. It turns you into a mirror, reflecting back whatever you think people want to see, while hiding the parts of yourself that might be judged. You start living in a constant state of performance. Every choice, Every opinion, every action is filtered through the question, will they approve? And here's the danger. The approval you get feels good, but it's never enough. The high fades quickly, and you need another hit. A compliment, a like, a nod of validation. Without it, you feel uneasy, as if you're slipping out of worthiness. And because people's approval can change with their mood, their biases, or their own insecurities, your sense of self becomes fragile, constantly rising and falling based on forces you can't control. The cost is heavy. You start avoiding risks that could lead to disapproval, even if they align with your dreams. You keep opinions to yourself to avoid offending someone. You take on work you don't want, agree to commitments you can't handle, and tolerate treatment you don't deserve, all because saying no feels like risking rejection. And here's the cruel irony. The more you chase approval, the less genuine connection you actually experience. Because the version of you that everyone likes isn't the whole you. It's the edited version, the agreeable version, the safe version. And when people only know the mask, their approval isn't truly for you. It's for the role you've been playing. Approval addiction also feeds perfectionism. You start believing you have to be flawless to be accepted. One mistake feels like it could undo all the goodwill you've built. So you overthink every move, triple-check every word, try to please everyone at once, and still lie awake worrying about the one person who might not be happy with you. Breaking this pattern means facing one of the scariest truths. Not everyone will like you, and that's okay. In fact, it's necessary. If everyone approves of you, it probably means you've been editing yourself too much. Real authenticity will attract some people and repel others, and that's how you find the ones who actually belong in your life. It also means shifting your measure of worth from external to internal, asking yourself, am I proud of this choice? Instead of, will they be proud of me? It means learning to validate yourself, to give yourself permission, to stand by your values, even when they're unpopular. The truth is, chasing approval is a race with no finish line. No matter how much you get, there will always be someone who disapproves. There will always be someone unimpressed. And if your worth is tied to winning them over, you'll never feel secure. But when you start approving of yourself, your choices, your boundaries, your truth, you stop needing to be everything to everyone. Approval can feel good, but it's not oxygen. You don't need it to live, and the day you truly believe that is the day you stop performing and start living as yourself, without apology, without masks, and without waiting for anyone's permission to take up space. Fearing missing out, FOMO. It starts as a whisper, a subtle unease when you see someone else doing something you're not. You scroll through your phone, and there it is, a friend at a party you didn't attend, a colleague announcing a new achievement, strangers traveling to places you've never been. You feel that tiny pang in your chest. The thought creeps in, I should be there. I should be doing that. I'm missing something. This is the seed of FOMO, the fear of missing out. On the surface, it seems harmless, just a natural human reaction to seeing others experience something exciting. But underneath, it can grow into something far more damaging. A constant sense that no matter where you are, you're supposed to be somewhere else. FOMO feeds on comparison. It takes the highlight reels of other people's lives and uses them as proof that you're falling behind. You start measuring your own life not by what you value, but by what other people appear to be enjoying. You could be having a peaceful night at home, but the moment you see others out together, that peace starts to feel like boredom. You could be focused on your own work, but when someone else posts their success, your progress suddenly feels too slow. And here's the trap. FOMO doesn't care about the reality of those moments you're envying. It doesn't remind you that the party you wish you were at might be exhausting, that the vacation could be stressful, that the success you're comparing yourself to may have cost them years of sacrifice you wouldn't want to pay. FOMO doesn't deal in reality. It deals in illusions. It keeps you restless. You say yes to things you don't actually want to do, just so you won't feel left out. You spread yourself thin, chasing experiences, events and opportunities that might not even matter to you, because the fear of being excluded feels worse than the exhaustion of overcommitting. You fill your calendar to avoid the ache of wondering what else might be happening without you. The cost? You stop fully experiencing the moments you are in. You can be sitting in a room full of friends, but part of your mind is wondering what's happening somewhere else. You can be working on something important to you, but you keep checking your phone in case you're missing an update. Life becomes a constant state of partial presence, never fully here, never fully there. And here's the deeper truth. FOMO often isn't about the events themselves. It's about what we think those events represent. We fear missing out on connection, belonging, excitement, or opportunity. We think that if we're not part of this moment, we're losing our place in the story of life. But in chasing everything, we miss the most important thing, being fully alive in the moments we actually have. Overcoming FOMO doesn't mean isolating yourself or ignoring the world. It means getting clear on what truly matters to you. It means asking, if no one could see what I'm doing right now, would I still want to be here? Because if the only reason you want to be somewhere is so others know you were there, it's not about the experience, it's about the image. It also means making peace with the truth that you can't have it all. Every choice you make is a trade-off. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else, and that's not a loss, that's life. The question isn't, am I missing out, but am I missing out on the right things? The reality is you will miss out on some things, and that's okay. The goal isn't to be everywhere, it's to be fully where you are. The more you value your present moment, the less power FOMO has over you. Because once you stop living for what you might be missing, you start realizing just how much you've been missing right in front of you. Catastrophizing the future. It begins with a thought, small, fleeting, but sharp enough to pierce your peace. Something could go wrong. Maybe it's a meeting tomorrow, a bill you have to pay, a conversation you've been avoiding. In most minds, it would pass, but in yours it multiplies. That single possibility becomes a dozen worst-case scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. This is catastrophizing the future, turning uncertainty into disaster before anything has even happened. It's not just worrying. Worry circles the problem. Catastrophizing builds a stage for it, writes the script, and casts you as the one who can't escape. Your mind doesn't stop at, what if this goes badly? It moves straight to, this will go badly, then to, it will be a disaster, and finally, and when it's a disaster, it will ruin everything. You start stacking assumptions on top of assumptions, until the weight of all those imagined outcomes feels as heavy as if they were real. The danger is, your body reacts to these imagined crises as if they're already here. Your heart rate rises, your muscles tense, your sleep suffers. You rehearse the panic before there's even anything to panic about. By the time reality arrives, which is often far less dramatic, you're already exhausted from living it in your head. Catastrophizing also shrinks your life. You avoid opportunities because you've already pictured them failing in detail. You over-prepare for events that might not even happen, burning energy on problems that never come. You hesitate on risks that could have brought growth, because you've convinced yourself they'll only lead to pain. And here's the twist. Catastrophizing can feel responsible. It disguises itself as being prepared. You tell yourself you're just thinking ahead, just being realistic. But there's a difference between preparation and pre-suffering. Preparation makes you ready. Pre-suffering makes you live the pain twice, once in your mind, and once, maybe, in reality. The truth is, most of the disasters you imagine will never happen. Studies show that the vast majority of the things we fear turn out better than expected, or never happen at all. And yet in the moment, your brain treats every what-if as a warning that must be taken seriously. Why? Because catastrophizing is the brain's attempt to feel in control. If you can predict the worst, maybe you can avoid it. But this control is an illusion. You're not preventing anything by imagining it. You're just stealing peace from the present. Breaking the cycle starts with catching the spiral. The moment you hear yourself saying, "But what if?" stop and ask, what else could happen? Force your mind to picture neutral or even positive possibilities. Remind yourself that uncertainty doesn't automatically mean danger. It's also about learning to tolerate the unknown. Life will always carry risks. You will face challenges. But meeting them as they come is very different from living them in advance. Every ounce of energy you spend surviving imaginary disasters is energy you won't have when a real problem needs solving. The truth is, your mind is a powerful storyteller. It can write endings that will never exist. It can convince you that the future is already decided, but you are not obligated to believe every story it tells. You can choose to stand in the present and say, "I'll face it if it comes, but until then I'm living here." Because the future isn't a script you've already read, it's a blank page, and catastrophizing is just one way to fill it before the story has even begun. Binary thinking. Binary thinking is one of the mind's favorite shortcuts, the instinct to divide the world into clean opposing categories, good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, friend or enemy. It feels tidy, decisive, and efficient. You make quick judgments, you feel certain, and you believe you've found clarity. But here's the problem. In its simplicity, binary thinking erases the complexity of reality. It edits out the messy, contradictory truths that don't fit neatly into either box. It starts subtly. You label your day as good or bad based on one or two events, ignoring the 100 little shades in between. You judge yourself as strong or weak, depending on how you handled a single challenge. You decide a relationship is working or failing without seeing the moments of growth hiding inside conflict. At first, it feels like you're being decisive, but really, you're just building walls between yourself and the truth. The danger of binary thinking is that it traps you in extremes. If something isn't completely successful, it's a complete failure. If you're not perfect, you're broken. If someone makes a mistake, they're irredeemable. If an opportunity doesn't come easily, it's not meant to be. This kind of thinking creates a rigid emotional world where you're constantly swinging between overconfidence and hopelessness, between idolizing and condemning others, between holding on too tightly and letting go too soon. It doesn't stop with how you see yourself. It shapes how you see people. Binary thinking makes it easy to flatten a person into a single trait. They're honest, they're selfish, they're kind, they're toxic. And once you put them in a box, it's hard to let them out. You stop seeing them as capable of change or complexity. You stop allowing for the fact that someone can be caring in one context and careless in another, trustworthy in some ways, and flawed in others. Part of why binary thinking feels so comfortable is because it feeds our need for certainty. Life is unpredictable, and uncertainty makes us anxious. Binary thinking gives us the illusion of control, the belief that we've already figured out what's good and what's bad, so we can act accordingly. But this illusion comes at a cost. It blinds us to reality. The real world is nuanced, layered, and contradictory. Reducing it to absolutes means you miss the full truth of situations, people, and even yourself. And the more you rely on binary thinking, the harder it becomes to navigate life's complexity. You might avoid opportunities because you can't guarantee success. You might end relationships too quickly because you see conflict as a sign they're doomed. You might refuse to forgive yourself because you think one bad choice erases all the good you've done. The truth is, very few things in life are purely one thing or the other. The friend who disappointed you may still love you deeply. The job you complain about might still be shaping skills you'll need for your dream career. The mistake that embarrasses you today might be the turning point that changes your life. Binary thinking hides these truths because it demands an easy answer, and real answers are rarely easy. Breaking free from this mindset starts with embracing both and thinking. Instead of saying, "This is good" or "This is bad," you learn to say, "This has good and bad in it." Instead of labeling yourself as a success or a failure, you recognize that you can succeed in one area while still struggling in another. You start allowing contradictions to exist without trying to resolve them into something neat. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, disagreements don't have to end relationships. Mistakes don't have to define your worth. Uncertainty stops being the enemy and becomes the space where growth happens. You begin to see life not as a set of binary decisions, but as an ongoing conversation with countless possible answers. It's not easy. Binary thinking feels safe because it's predictable, but that safety is an illusion. It keeps you from evolving. The gray areas are less comfortable, but they're where reality actually lives. They're where compassion grows, where understanding deepens, where opportunities hide in places you thought were closed. The moment you step out of the black and white mindset, you realize that life was never meant to be just one thing or the other. It's both light and dark, gain and loss, pain and beauty, often at the same time. And when you can hold all of that without rushing to reduce it, you stop living in extremes and start living in truth, living for the highlight reel. We live in an age where life isn't just lived and it's curated. Every moment is a potential post, every achievement a potential announcement, every joy a potential performance. And slowly, almost without noticing, you stop living for the experience and start living for the image of it. Living for the highlight reel means measuring your worth by the best snapshots of your life, the vacations, the milestones, the celebrations, and then broadcasting them to the world, hoping they prove something. At first it feels harmless. You're just sharing, you're just documenting. But beneath the surface, it starts to shape the way you move through life. You don't just ask, "Do I want to do this?" You ask, "Will this look good?" The danger isn't just in what you share, but in what you hide. The days that aren't worth photographing, the moments that are messy, ordinary, or painfully real. Those don't make the real. And when you hide them from others, you start hiding them from yourself. You begin to believe that the only parts of you worth showing are the ones that can impress. The more you live for the highlight reel, the more you start comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's best moments. You scroll and see people smiling, celebrating, traveling, achieving. You forget that you're looking at their edited version of life, not their full story. And because you're comparing it to your unfiltered reality, the laundry, the bills, the arguments, the doubts, you start feeling like you're falling behind. This mindset also breeds a subtle kind of emptiness. The high of posting something impressive fades quickly, and you need another. Another trip, another purchase, another perfect moment to keep the reel going. The pressure to maintain the image starts to outweigh the joy of living it. You might even find yourself making choices not because they're right for you, but because they'll play well online. And here's the hidden cost. Living for the highlight reel robs you of presence. You're at the concert, but you're filming instead of feeling the music. You're on vacation, but you're staging the perfect shot instead of soaking in the view. You're at dinner with friends, but you're thinking about captions instead of conversations. The moment becomes a prop, and you become its photographer. The truth is, the highlight reel isn't the problem by itself. It's the belief that it's the whole truth. Real life is made up of the in-between moments, the mornings you wake up feeling lost, the nights you sit with a friend in silence, the small victories that no one else will ever see. These moments may never make it onto a screen, but they're the ones that actually shape you. Breaking free from living for the highlight reel means redefining what's worth capturing. It means giving as much value to the moments that no one will witness as you do to the ones that get applause. It means asking yourself, would I still want this if no one knew about it? And letting that answer guide you. It's not about rejecting social media or never sharing your life. It's about remembering that the most meaningful experiences don't need an audience to matter. The memories that stay with you aren't always the ones that photograph well. They're the ones that change you in ways you can't capture in a picture. When you stop performing for the real, you start noticing the moments you used to overlook. The way sunlight hits your desk in the morning, the warmth of a conversation that goes nowhere but feels safe, the satisfaction of finishing something no one else will ever know you worked on. And these moments, though invisible to the world, begin to fill you in a way the highlight reel never could. Because in the end, life isn't lived in snapshots. It's lived in the messy, unpolished, unshared hours in between. And when you start living for those, really living, you realize the best parts of life were never meant to fit into a frame. Perfection paralysis. It starts with good intentions. You want to do something well, so well that no one could criticize it, question it, or find a single flaw. You tell yourself you're just aiming high, setting a standard, but somewhere along the way, aiming high turns into aiming for perfect. And when perfect becomes the goal, movement becomes impossible. Perfection paralysis is that silent trap, where you spend more time preparing, tweaking, and rethinking than actually doing. You tell yourself you're not ready yet. You need more information, more practice, more time. The project sits untouched because it's not quite right. The decision gets delayed because you haven't found the best option. The conversation never happens because you haven't rehearsed the perfect words. The irony is, perfectionism feels productive. You're busy thinking, planning, revising. But busyness isn't progress. It's a performance for your own fear. You stay trapped in the safety of preparation because doing the real thing means facing the possibility that it won't live up to the perfect image in your head. And that's the cruel truth. Perfectionism isn't about being flawless. It's about avoiding failure. As long as you don't act, you can keep imagining that the outcome will be flawless when you finally do. But once you start, that fantasy has to meet reality, and reality, by nature, is imperfect. Perfection paralysis doesn't just slow you down, it rewrites your definition of success. Instead of success meaning doing something well, it becomes doing something without mistakes. Instead of success meaning making progress, it becomes avoiding criticism. You measure yourself not by what you create, but by whether you can protect yourself from the discomfort of falling short. This mindset has a ripple effect. You avoid new opportunities because you can't guarantee you'll excel immediately. You stay in your comfort zone, repeating what you already know you can do, instead of risking something unfamiliar. You become an expert in preparation, but a stranger to execution. And the more time passes, the heavier the weight becomes, because now you're not just afraid of doing it imperfectly, you're ashamed you haven't done it at all. Perfection paralysis also feeds comparison. You look at other people's finished work and forget that you're comparing it to your own rough drafts. You see their highlight reels and hold them next to your unedited process, and every time you do, you convince yourself you're still not ready, still not enough. The truth is, perfection is an illusion. Even the people you admire most don't achieve it. They release work with flaws, they make mistakes, they look back years later and see all the things they would change, but they keep moving. They understand that done will always beat perfect but unfinished. Breaking out of perfection paralysis means reframing what success looks like. It means deciding that an imperfect first step is more valuable than a perfect plan that never leaves your head. It means treating mistakes as teachers instead of proof you shouldn't have tried. It also means making peace with the discomfort of progress. Growth isn't elegant, it's messy. Your first attempts will be awkward. Your early work will embarrass you later. But that's not failure. That's evidence you're moving. That's the trail of proof that you were willing to begin. Start small. Launch before you feel ready. Let people see the rough edges. Because the truth is, no matter how much you prepare, you will never avoid imperfection. But you can avoid a life of regret by refusing to wait for perfect before you begin. And maybe that's the real cost of perfection paralysis. Not the missed deadlines, not the stalled projects, but the unlived potential. The dreams that stay locked in your head because you were too afraid of what they might look like in the light of day. One day, you'll realize that perfect never comes, but progress can happen right now. And once you choose progress over perfection, you stop waiting for the ideal moment and start creating the life you've been postponing. The identity trap. The identity trap isn't something you step into overnight. It's something that forms slowly, piece by piece, over years. It starts with how people describe you when you're young. You're so responsible. You're shy. You're smart. You're difficult. You hear it enough times, and it becomes part of your story. Sometimes you take it on willingly because it makes you feel seen. Sometimes you accept it because resisting it feels too exhausting. Either way, you start building a life around it. An identity gives you direction, but it also quietly sets boundaries on who you're allowed to be. It becomes the invisible script you use to navigate life. If your identity is the dependable one, you say yes to every request, even when you're drained. If you're the tough one, you hide your pain because vulnerability doesn't fit the role. If you're the smart one, you avoid situations where you might look ignorant. You're no longer living from curiosity. You're living from a brand. The trap is that identity feels safe. It gives you a role to play, a sense of certainty in a world full of uncertainty. But that safety is an illusion. It's not protection. It's confinement. You're not just making choices. You're making choices that match the version of you think others expect. And with every decision filtered through that lens, the walls get higher. Here's the dangerous part. Many identities are born from survival, not truth. Maybe you learned to be the quiet one because speaking up caused conflict at home. Maybe you became the funny one because humor was the only way to be accepted. Maybe you became the caretaker because neglect taught you to earn love through service. Over time, these survival strategies harden into personality traits, and you forget they were choices you made in response to a specific environment, not the unchangeable core of who you are. Once you're stuck in the identity trap, change feels like betrayal. If you've been the strong one your whole life, asking for help feels like weakness. If you've been the selfless one, setting boundaries feels selfish. If you've been the achiever, slowing down feels like failure. You're not just breaking a habit, you're breaking the image you've lived inside for years. This is why people cling to identities, even when they're suffering inside them. The pain of staying feels familiar. The uncertainty of change feels unbearable. The trap convinces you that being consistent is the same thing as being authentic. But authenticity isn't about never changing. It's about staying honest with who you are right now, even if that contradicts who you were yesterday. Escaping the identity trap means becoming willing to disappoint people who only know the older version of you. It means risking their confusion, their resistance, even their disapproval. It means answering the uncomfortable question, who am I without this label? That's not an easy question to face because without the label, you lose the certainty of your role. But you also gain something much bigger, the freedom to redefine yourself at any time. Here's a truth that's hard to accept. People will try to keep you in the role they're comfortable with. If you've always been the listener, they may feel threatened when you start speaking up. If you've always been the happy one, they may resist when you show sadness. Not because they're malicious, but because your change forces them to see that people can outgrow the boxes they've been put in, and that can be unsettling. But change is the only way you'll discover the parts of yourself you've been neglecting. You may find that the quiet you isn't actually afraid to speak. You were just waiting for someone to listen. You may discover that the tough you isn't unfeeling. You were just afraid that softness would be used against you. You may realize that the selfless you isn't endlessly giving. You were just afraid to admit you had needs too. The moment you give yourself permission to evolve without apology, the trap loses its power. You stop asking, does this fit my identity? And start asking, does this fit me now? And in that shift, your life expands. You stop performing a role and start living a story. One where you're allowed to rewrite yourself as many times as it takes to feel true. Because the truth is, you are not a fixed label. You are not one role, one story, one version. You are a fluid, complex, ever-changing being. And the more you allow yourself to grow beyond the identities that once defined you, the more you step into the freedom of being someone who cannot be trapped by a single name. The I don't deserve better belief. The I don't deserve better belief is not just a thought you have from time to time. It's a quiet, relentless narrative that seeps into everything you do. It's not always loud, not always obvious. Sometimes it's just the background noise of your life, humming under every decision. This is the best you'll get. Don't ask for more. Don't risk losing what little you have. And because it's been there so long, you stop recognizing it as a belief. You start mistaking it for truth. It doesn't show up all at once. It's built slowly, like sediment, layer by layer, year after year. Maybe it began in childhood when you learned to be grateful for what you got, even if what you got wasn't enough. Maybe you were told not to be picky or ask for too much, so you learned to silence your wants before they even formed. Maybe you were made to feel like your needs were a burden, so you stopped bringing them up altogether. Or maybe life simply disappointed you enough times that you lowered your expectations just to survive the constant letdowns. Over time, the belief starts to shape your reality. You stay in jobs that leave you drained because you're convinced you'd fail anywhere else. You cling to relationships that make you feel unseen because deep down, you believe that's all you're worth. You keep friends who take more than they give because you're afraid no one better would want you. Even your dreams start shrinking. Not because you stopped wanting more, but because you stopped believing you were allowed to. And here's the cruel irony. When you believe you don't deserve better, you unconsciously start making choices that keep you exactly where you are. You turn down opportunities because you assume you'll fail. You don't apply for the promotion because you convince yourself they'd never pick you. You don't speak up when you're mistreated because you tell yourself it's not worth the fight. The belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. a cycle where your lack of action keeps your circumstances small, and those circumstances reinforce the belief that you were right to settle. It hides behind reasonable-sounding excuses. You tell yourself you're just being practical, that you're not the type of person who gets certain things. You say things like, "It's fine, I can manage," or "It's not that bad," or "At least I have something." These words feel safe. They let you avoid the discomfort of change, but underneath them is resignation, the quiet acceptance of a life you never truly chose. What makes this belief so dangerous is that it rewires your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who could step into something better and start seeing yourself as someone who belongs exactly where they are. The life you've settled for starts to feel like it fits, not because it's right, but because it's familiar, and familiar, even when it hurts, is easier than uncertain. But here's the truth most people don't want to face. The "I don't deserve better" belief is a lie. A persistent, convincing lie, but still a lie. It's not an accurate reflection of your worth. It's the residue of old wounds, past conditioning, and learned limitations. It was built by moments where you felt powerless, but you are not powerless now. Breaking free from it doesn't happen in one big leap. It happens in small, deliberate acts of self-respect. It might start with saying no to someone who's been taking advantage of your time. It might mean applying for something you don't feel ready for. It might be ending a relationship you've been afraid to walk away from. Every time you choose a little more for yourself, you chip away at the foundation of the belief. And the more you act against it, the more you start to see the truth. Worthiness is not something you earn. It's not a prize handed to people who prove themselves flawless. You already deserve better, simply because you are human. The only thing between you and more is the story you've been telling yourself about why you can't have it. One day, if you keep pushing back, you'll look around and realize you're no longer living inside that old belief. You'll realize you've been quietly upgrading your life bit by bit, not because you suddenly became worthy, but because you finally started acting like you were. And maybe the most powerful shift is this. You stop asking, "Do I deserve better?" and start asking, "Why was I ever willing to believe I didn't?" Rescuing others to avoid your own pain. There's a certain type of person who seems endlessly selfless. They're the ones who rush in when someone's in trouble, who drop everything to help, who shoulder burdens that aren't theirs to carry. To the outside world, they look like saints, endlessly giving, endlessly caring. But beneath that endless giving, there's often a truth they'll never admit. Sometimes, rescuing others isn't about pure generosity. Sometimes it's about avoiding the pain they'd have to face if they stopped. For some, this pattern starts in childhood. Maybe you grew up in a house where chaos was the norm, where someone was always hurting, always angry, always on the edge of collapse. And you learned young that the only way to keep yourself safe was to fix things for others. You became the peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who smoothed over messes before they exploded. Helping others wasn't just kindness, it was survival. Over time, this survival strategy becomes an identity. You start to see yourself as the helper, the problem solver, the one everyone can rely on. You take pride in it. You tell yourself it's who you are. But what you might not realize is that constantly rescuing others also keeps you distracted. Too distracted to look at your own wounds. As long as someone else needs saving, you don't have to sit in the discomfort of your own unhealed places. This is where the trap takes hold. Rescuing becomes your shield. When your own emotions threaten to rise up, the grief, the loneliness, the anger you've been avoiding, you find someone else to save. Their crisis becomes your escape route from your own. And because the world applauds selflessness, no one questions it. People thank you. They tell you you're amazing. They call you strong. And you cling to that praise because it's easier to be admired for saving someone else than it is to admit you need saving yourself. But this constant rescuing has a cost. When you're always focused on others, you start neglecting your own needs. You push your pain further down, hoping it will stay buried. You convince yourself that dealing with it can wait, that it's not urgent, not as important as what someone else is going through. But pain doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits, it builds, it seeps into your choices in ways you don't notice until you're exhausted, resentful, or burned out. There's another danger. When rescuing becomes a habit, you can start confusing love with responsibility. You might find yourself drawn to people who are always in crisis, always broken, always needing you. You tell yourself you're helping, but deep down you might be keeping them exactly where they are, because if they get better, if they no longer need you, you'd have to face the emptiness you've been avoiding. Sometimes rescuing others is also a way to control the chaos you couldn't control before. If you can fix their life, if you can make their pain go away, maybe you can rewrite your own story, the one where no one came to save you. It's a beautiful instinct, but it can also become an endless loop, helping others so you don't have to feel helpless yourself, all while your own healing is left undone. Breaking this cycle doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It doesn't mean you harden your heart or refuse to help. It means you start asking a different question. Am I helping them because they truly need it, or because I can't stand to sit with my own feelings? It means learning that your worth isn't defined by how many people you save, and that letting someone face their own battles can be an act of respect, not abandonment. It also means turning some of that care inward. The same urgency you feel for others' well-being needs to be applied to your own. That might mean setting boundaries that feel uncomfortable at first, saying I can't right now without drowning in guilt, allowing yourself to sit in the silence you've been avoiding, even when it's painful, because that silence is where the real healing begins. The truth is, you cannot rescue yourself by rescuing everyone else. You can't outrun your pain by running towards someone else's. And the longer you try, the more you risk building a life where you're surrounded by people in need, yet completely disconnected from your own needs. One day you'll realize that the person you've been trying to save through every act of selflessness has been you all along. And when you turn that energy inward, when you give yourself the same patience, care, and protection you've been giving away, you'll discover something powerful. You were never meant to save everyone else first. You were meant to save yourself, so you could finally help others from a place of wholeness instead of exhaustion. Mental time travel. Mental time travel sounds like science fiction, but it's something we all do every single day. It's not about machines or wormholes. It's about your mind's ability to leave the present moment and live in a different point in time. Sometimes you leap backward, replaying old memories in vivid detail. Sometimes you jump forward, imagining futures that haven't happened yet. And sometimes, without realizing it, you spend more time in these imagined timelines than you do in the life that's actually unfolding around you. At first, this doesn't seem harmful. Looking back can be nostalgic. Looking ahead can be motivating. But the problem starts when mental time travel stops being a conscious choice and becomes your default state, when you can't stop revisiting the past or rehearsing the future. Because when you live anywhere but now, you miss the only time you ever truly have. The present. The backward trips often feel heavy. You replay the conversation you wish you'd handled differently, over and over, trying to rewrite it in your head. You remember the mistakes that still make your stomach drop, the betrayals that still sting, the moments you wish you could erase. Sometimes you idealize the past instead, romanticizing it until it glows in your memory. Not because it was perfect, but because it feels safer than the uncertainty of now. In both cases, you're stuck in a loop, reliving things you can't change, while the present quietly slips through your fingers. The forward trips can be just as consuming. You rehearse every possible scenario, trying to plan for every outcome. You run through what you'll say in a meeting, how you'll handle a confrontation, what you'll do if things go wrong. Sometimes it's not even planning, it's worrying. You imagine worst-case scenarios so vividly that your body reacts as if they're happening right now. Your heart races, your chest tightens, your mind spins. You suffer twice, once in imagination, and again if the thing ever actually happens. This constant mental travel feels like control, but it's not. It's the illusion of control. You can't rewrite the past, no matter how many times you revisit it. You can't predict the future, no matter how many times you rehearse it. All you're really doing is exhausting yourself in timelines that don't exist. And here's the hidden cost. The more time you spend in other moments, the less capable you become of living in this one. You stop noticing the small, real details around you, the sound of someone's laugh, the warmth of your coffee, the way the sunlight hits your desk. These moments don't just pass. They vanish, unexperienced, because you weren't here to receive them. Mental time travel also feeds anxiety and regret. The past-focused version keeps you chained to guilt, shame, or longing. The future-focused version keeps you trapped in fear or fantasy. Both rob you of peace. And yet, you return to them again and again because they feel familiar, even when they hurt. Breaking free doesn't mean you never think about the past or future. It means you stop living there. It means you learn to visit without unpacking your bags. Reflection can teach you. Planning can prepare you, but only if you're anchored in the present while you do it. Anchoring yourself takes practice. It's in the small pauses, noticing your breath, feeling your feet on the floor, tasting your food instead of eating on autopilot. It's in catching yourself mid-worry and asking, is this happening right now, or am I time traveling again? And when the answer is time travel, you gently bring yourself back, not by force but by reminding yourself that this moment is the only one you can actually live. Because the truth is, the past is memory, the future is imagination, and the present is reality. You can't touch yesterday. You can't hold tomorrow. But you can be here now, and the more you practice that, the less tempting it becomes to keep leaving. One day you'll realize that the peace you've been searching for in all those other timelines was here all along, waiting for you to come home. Thinking success is linear. We're taught to imagine success as a straight upward line, a clean climb from where we are now to where we want to be. Step 1 leads to step 2 leads to step 3, and so on, until you reach the top. It's an appealing picture because it feels predictable, organized, and safe. If you just follow the steps, you'll get the reward. No mess, no chaos. But the truth is, success rarely looks like that. In reality, it's a tangled path, full of detours, setbacks, plateaus, and moments where you feel like you've gone backwards instead of forward. It's late nights where nothing works, followed by breakthroughs that seem to come out of nowhere. It's opportunities that appear unexpectedly, and plans that fall apart without warning. The belief that success is linear is seductive because it gives us a sense of control. We tell ourselves, if I do A, I'll get B. If I work hard enough, I'll get there exactly when I expect to. And when things don't go that way, when we hit delays, when we fail, when we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, we panic. We question ourselves. We assume we're doing something wrong, when in reality, we're just experiencing the messy, unpredictable process that success actually is. This mindset is dangerous because it makes you impatient. You start comparing your timeline to other people's. You see someone reach a milestone before you, and you assume they must know something you don't, or worse, that you've already missed your chance. You forget that you're looking at their highlight reel, not the years of trial and error that happened behind the scenes. When you think success is linear, you also tend to underestimate the value of your detours. You see a career change, a failed project, or a period of waiting as wasted time, when those experiences might be teaching you the exact skills, resilience, or perspective you'll need later. Sometimes, the things you thought were delays turn out to be the most important steps you took. And here's the reality that most people avoid admitting. Even when you arrive somewhere, the path doesn't straighten out. You don't reach a point where everything is stable forever. Life will still throw you curveballs. Circumstances will still change. You'll still have to adapt. Success isn't a final destination. It's a series of chapters, each with its own peaks and valleys. Breaking out of the linear mindset means embracing the mess. It means expecting the unexpected. It means seeing a setback not as the end, but as part of the story. When you hit an obstacle, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, how can I use this? You stop treating detours as failures and start treating them as training grounds. It also means releasing the pressure to match anyone else's pace. Your path is yours. It's shaped by your experiences, your strengths, your choices, and yes, your mistakes. Comparing your progress to someone else's is like comparing 2 completely different maps. You might be moving slower, but you might also be building something deeper, more sustainable, or more meaningful. When you accept that success is non-linear, you free yourself from the shame of falling behind. You stop obsessing over where you are right now and start focusing on showing up consistently. You recognize that the dips, plateaus, and rest periods aren't interruptions, they're part of the process. One day, you'll look back and realize that the path made sense all along. The wrong turns taught you what the right turns couldn't. The delays gave you time to grow into the person who could handle the next level. And the moments you thought were the end of the road were really just the start of a new direction. Success isn't a straight climb. It's a winding, unpredictable journey. And that's what makes it worth taking. Emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning is one of the most deceptive mental traps we fall into, and the most dangerous part is how natural it feels. It's the tendency to believe that if you feel something, it must automatically be the truth. If you feel anxious, it means something is wrong. If you feel guilty, you must have done something bad. If you feel unworthy, you must be unworthy. The feeling itself becomes the evidence, and because emotions are so powerful, we rarely stop to question them. At first glance, this might seem harmless. After all, our emotions are part of who we are. But emotional reasoning is different from healthy emotional awareness. Awareness says, I feel this way. Emotional reasoning says, I feel this way, so it must be reality. And when you accept feelings as facts, you risk making choices that keep you trapped in the very emotions you're trying to escape. This happens because emotions evolved long before complex reasoning did. In ancient times, feelings were survival signals. Fear told you to run from predators. Anger told you to defend your territory. Joy told you to repeat whatever brought you that sense of safety or abundance. These instincts worked in a world where threats were immediate and physical, but in the modern world, many of our threats are imagined. A critical email, a judgmental glance, a quiet phone. The emotion is still real, but the danger is often not. Here's where the trap tightens. When you believe your feelings without question, you start shaping your actions around them. If you feel incompetent, you might avoid opportunities that could prove you wrong. If you feel disliked, you might withdraw from others, creating the very distance you fear. If you feel doomed to fail, you might stop trying altogether, and in doing so, guarantee the failure you were trying to avoid. Over time, this cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Your feelings lead to actions that confirm the feelings, which then lead to more of the same actions. Before long, you're not living based on reality. You're living inside the echo chamber of your own emotions. Emotional reasoning thrives in moments of vulnerability. When you're tired, stressed, or already doubting yourself, the feelings grow louder and more convincing. One minor setback at work can spiral into, I'm terrible at my job. A friend cancelling plans can become, no one actually likes me. A mistake in a project can turn into, I'm not cut out for this. None of these thoughts are necessarily true, but the emotions behind them feel undeniable. The problem is, our brains don't naturally separate what we feel from what is true. We are wired to treat emotions as evidence. This is why an imagined danger can trigger a full-blown physical reaction. Your heart races, your stomach knots, your palms sweat, even if nothing is actually happening. Your body believes the story your feelings are telling. Breaking free from emotional reasoning doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or pretending they don't matter. Feelings are valid, and they often contain valuable information. But they are not the whole truth. You can acknowledge them without surrendering to them. That starts with inserting a pause, a moment between feeling and believing, where you can ask yourself, what are the actual facts here? One strategy is to write it down. If you feel like you've ruined everything, list the concrete evidence for and against that belief. If you feel like someone is upset with you, note what they've actually said or done to indicate that, and then consider alternative explanations. Often you'll find that the facts don't match the intensity of the feeling. Another approach is to treat emotions like weather. You don't deny it's raining, but you also don't assume it will rain forever. You accept that feelings, like weather, are temporary conditions. You can carry an umbrella without deciding the world is permanently stormy. And here's something to remember. Feelings can be real without being accurate. You can feel unlovable and still be deeply loved. You can feel unsafe and still be perfectly secure. You can feel like a failure and still be in the middle of a learning process that will lead to growth. Emotional reasoning blurs that line, but with awareness, you can learn to see it clearly again. The more you practice separating feelings from facts, the more freedom you gain. You stop letting passing emotions dictate permanent choices. You stop sabotaging yourself based on a temporary state of mind, and slowly you start living less in the world of imagined truths and more in the reality that actually exists. Because the truth is this: your emotions are not your enemy, but they are also not your ultimate authority. They are signals, not verdicts. And when you learn to question them, to sit with them without bowing to them, you reclaim the power to act on what's real, not just on what you feel. The "if I try, I might fail" dilemma. The "if I try, I might fail" dilemma is the silent killer of dreams. It doesn't knock on your door with chaos or drama. It doesn't show up as an obvious enemy. Instead, it sits quietly in your mind, dressed up as caution, dressed up as responsibility, dressed up as logic. It whispers reasonable-sounding lines. Now isn't the right time. You just need a little more preparation. Let's wait until you're absolutely ready. And while those words feel protective, what they really protect is your fear. This fear is ancient. It's woven into the way human beings are wired to survive. From the earliest days of our existence, making a wrong move could mean losing everything. Your resources, your safety, even your life. Our brains learned to err on the side of caution, to avoid risk when possible. And while that made sense when a mistake could mean not surviving the night, in the modern world, it often means something else: staying small to avoid the emotional sting of failure. For many people, this fear doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It has roots. Maybe you grew up in a home where mistakes weren't tolerated, where being wrong brought punishment or shame. Maybe you were praised only when you succeeded, so you began to tie your entire worth to winning. Or maybe life simply handed you enough disappointments that you learned to shield yourself from hope. Over time, you decided that the best way to never be crushed is to never put yourself in a position to be crushed. But here's the catch: the same armor that shields you from failure also blocks you from success. You can't selectively avoid risk. When you don't try, you don't just protect yourself from loss. You also protect yourself from growth, from discovery, from ever knowing what might have been possible for you. The life you build becomes one you can manage, one you can control, but it's a life without depth, without the satisfaction that comes from truly testing yourself. This fear often wears the mask of perfectionism. You tell yourself you're just waiting until it's perfect before you start. You research, you plan, you prepare, but the launch never comes. You polish the idea until the moment passes. It feels like you're being careful, but what you're really doing is postponing the day you have to face reality, the day you have to find out whether you're as capable as you hope or as inadequate as you fear. It also hides in comparison. You scroll through people's highlight reels and think, "They're so far ahead of me, what's the point of even starting?" You forget that you're seeing their middle or their peak, not the long, messy trail of failures that got them there. You forget that every single person you admire started with nothing but a beginning. And here's the bitter truth: avoiding failure doesn't protect your confidence, it corrodes it. Every time you back away from a challenge, a small part of you notices. It whispers, "See? You didn't even try. Maybe you really aren't capable." Over months, years, decades, those whispers turn into your internal voice. You begin to identify as someone who plays it safe, someone who just doesn't do those things. And eventually, you forget that it was fear, not lack of ability, that wrote that identity for you. Overcoming this dilemma isn't about pretending failure doesn't hurt. It does. Sometimes it will sting deeply. Sometimes it will feel humiliating. But failure itself is not the end. It's a process. It's a teacher that strips away illusions and hands you truths you couldn't learn any other way. People who succeed aren't magically fearless. They've simply learned to keep moving, even when fear and doubt scream at them to stop. One of the most effective ways to break this pattern is to start small, intentionally. Choose something that matters, but not so much that the stakes feel paralyzing. Take the step, see what happens. You might fail, but you'll realize that failure didn't destroy you. And once you survive it, the next leap feels a little less impossible. You can also reframe failure as data, not a verdict. If you try something and it doesn't work, that's not proof you're hopeless. It's proof you have information you didn't have before. And information is power. Every failed attempt sharpens your understanding, hones your instincts, and builds resilience that no amount of theoretical planning can give you. The most tragic thing about the "if I try, I might fail" mindset is that it keeps you in a paradox. Yes, trying means risking failure, but not trying guarantees it. You fail by default when you choose inaction. You fail by never even entering the arena. And one day, if you're not careful, you'll realize you've built a life that's safe but suffocating. A life where you never had to face the sharp edges of failure, but also never tasted the rush of doing something you didn't think you could do. So the real question isn't, if I try, will I fail? The real question is, if I don't try, will I regret it? And if the answer is yes, you already know what you need to do. Negativity bias. Negativity bias is one of the mind's oldest survival mechanisms and one of its most exhausting. It's the tendency to give more weight to bad experiences, negative feedback, and potential threats than to positive ones. You could receive 10 compliments and 1 insult, and the insult will echo in your head all day while the compliments fade into the background. You could have a week of smooth progress and 1 setback, and the setback will dominate your mood. This isn't because you're weak or overly dramatic. It's because your brain evolved to prioritize danger. In ancient times, survival depended on noticing threats before anything else. A rustle in the bushes might mean food, but it might also mean a predator. The human brain learned that overlooking a danger could cost you your life, while overlooking something pleasant had little consequence. Over generations, this wired us to scan for the negative first. The problem is, in modern life, this survival feature works against us. We're no longer living in constant physical danger, but our brains still treat emotional discomfort as a threat. A critical comment, a small failure, a social rejection. These light up the brain's alarm systems as if they were life or death situations. You react with the same mental urgency as if you were avoiding a predator, except now the predator is an awkward email or an unfriendly glance. Negativity bias also shapes your memory. Studies show that negative events are processed more deeply and remembered more vividly than positive ones. It's why you can recall embarrassing moments from years ago in painful detail, but you struggle to remember a random good day. The bias doesn't just affect how you feel in the moment. It rewrites your personal history to make it seem more negative than it actually was. This bias impacts relationships too. In conversations, your mind may fixate on one misunderstood word instead of the many kind ones spoken. In conflict, you might mentally collect every past slight and use it as proof of someone's flaws, even if those moments were rare. This creates cycles of resentment and mistrust, not because reality is that negative, but because your brain keeps replaying the negative parts on loop. The bias can also affect your ambition. If you've tried something once and failed, your brain will store that failure more prominently than the successes you've had. The next time an opportunity appears, the failure memory flashes brighter than any memory of achievement. This is why some people avoid risk altogether. They're not lazy. They're conditioned to remember failure as more real, more defining, and more permanent than success. Breaking free from negativity bias doesn't mean ignoring problems or pretending everything is fine. It means balancing the scale. Your brain is naturally tilted toward the negative, so you have to intentionally tilt it back toward the positive. That might mean deliberately noticing small wins, writing down moments of gratitude, or spending a few extra seconds savoring something good so your brain has time to store it. One useful practice is replaying the good. If your mind keeps replaying a negative interaction, pause and recall a positive one in the same level of detail. What was said? How did it make you feel? What was the tone, the atmosphere, the energy? The more vividly you replay it, the more likely your brain is to remember it as strongly as the negative moment. It's also important to question your conclusions. Just because your brain is highlighting a negative doesn't mean it's the full picture. If you think that meeting was a disaster, ask yourself, was it truly all bad, or were there good moments I'm ignoring? Often, you'll find that the reality was mixed, but the bias filtered out the good. Over time, the goal isn't to erase negativity. That would be unrealistic and even dangerous, since some level of threat detection keeps us safe. The goal is to stop letting the bias dictate your worldview. When you actively collect and hold on to positive experiences, You train your mind to see a more accurate, balanced picture of your life. Because here's the truth. The world is not as bad as your brain sometimes makes it seem. But if you let negativity bias run unchallenged, you'll live as though it is. And that means you'll miss out on joy, connection, and opportunity. Not because they weren't there, but because your mind was too busy scanning for what might go wrong. Negativity bias is an old survival tool, but survival is not the same as living. You don't need to see every shadow as a threat anymore. You can choose to notice the light, not because you're naive, but because you finally understand that life isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about finding reasons to keep walking towards something better. Believing you're behind in life. Believing you're behind in life doesn't always feel like panic. Sometimes it's just a low hum in the background, a quiet unease that follows you through the day. You might wake up and feel it before you've even looked at your phone. Or maybe it strikes only after you scroll through a feed filled with other people's announcements, promotions, weddings, vacations, and perfect little snapshots of a life you think you should already be living. It's the thought that there's a timeline you were supposed to follow, and you've somehow missed the checkpoints. The right age for success, the right time for love, the right moment to have it all figured out. And now you're convinced you're running late, not by minutes but by years. You can trace the roots of this belief to the stories you grew up hearing. Parents, teachers, society, all with a script about how life is supposed to go. Go to school, pick a career, settle down, buy a house, have children, retire comfortably. And while there's nothing wrong with that path, it's just one path. But when you're told it's the only one that counts, any deviation feels like failure. The danger is these timelines are not just personal, they're collective illusions. They're handed down without question, reinforced by the people around us, and amplified 1,000 times over by the curated perfection of social media. You might be making real, meaningful progress in your life, but if it doesn't fit the script, it doesn't feel like progress. This belief can do quiet but serious damage. It can make you undervalue the life you have because you're constantly comparing it to the life you think you're supposed to have. It can push you into choices that aren't right for you just to catch up, rushing into relationships, taking jobs you hate, moving to places you don't want to live, all in the name of keeping pace with an imaginary clock. It also creates a warped sense of self-worth. Instead of measuring your value by who you are and what you're building, you measure it by how your timeline stacks up against someone else's. The friend who bought a house at 28, the classmate who became a manager at 30, the cousin who already has 3 kids. Their milestones become silent accusations in your mind, proof that you're falling behind. And yet, here's what's almost always true. The people you're comparing yourself to are comparing themselves to others. The friend with the house might envy your freedom. The classmate with the career might long for more time. The cousin with the kids might crave the independence you have. Everyone thinks someone else is ahead, and in that way no one ever truly feels caught up. The irony is that some of the most successful, fulfilled people are late bloomers. They didn't peak at 25 or 30. They spent years wandering, failing, learning, and changing direction. They started over multiple times, and when they did finally hit their stride, it wasn't because they raced against a clock. It was because they stopped looking at one altogether. If you believe you're behind, it's worth asking. Behind according to who? Behind compared to what? Because there is no single race we're all running. There is no universal calendar where your milestones are pre-scheduled. Your path is yours alone, and the pace you move at is part of what makes it yours. One way to loosen the grip of this belief is to stop measuring speed and start measuring alignment. The real question is not, am I moving fast enough, but am I moving in the right direction for me? Some people sprint toward a destination they don't even want, just so they can say they got there quickly. Others take their time and every step feels intentional. The second path often leads to more peace, more satisfaction, and ironically, more lasting success. Another thing to remember, timelines are flexible. You can start a business in your 50s. You can fall in love in your 70s. You can switch careers after decades in one field. The stories we hear about making it young are just one version of success, not the only one. The truth is, life is full of people who found their most important chapters much later than they expected. Believing you're behind in life is like running an endless race on a track that isn't real. And the day you realize the track was imaginary all along, you feel something incredible. Relief, because you see that there was never anything to catch up to. The finish line you were chasing was someone else's, and it was never meant for you. The moment you stop measuring your life by other people's clocks, you start to live on your own time. And living on your own time is not just freedom, it's the only way to truly arrive anywhere that feels like home,